What's going on YouTube? It's Tej, back again with another video, and it's the weekend. That means it's time to bring you another 2023 NFL mock draft, and it is indeed my first 3-rounder of this draft season. So today, you're seeing round 1. Saturday, we'll bring you round 2, and then ending it all off on Sunday will be the 3rd round. The first time we've talked about the 3rd round here on the channel. So really excited. A couple of trades in the top 10. I think this is a really fun draft. But of course, as we go along, be sure to tell me your favorite team and if you like this fit. And trust me, as we go through this, you will see that I do take onus in what you say in the comment section. I've kind of catered that into what I think might end up happening here. But ultimately, hey, it's February. We just now finished the Senior Bowl, which to me is a great time to figure out who is going to populate day 2. But we're really talking fits and schemes. And obviously, we still have some teams without head coaches. So plenty more to unfold throughout this draft process. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. Once again, I've already had the Indianapolis Colts move up to pick number 1. I'm not going to do anything cheeky. Last week I did Will Levis, but this week let's just have it be Bryce Young. If they do forfeit those trade, assets, extra picks, people to move up to 1, let's say 2 1s, 2 2s, maybe there is something in taking the most quote unquote surefire player at the position in Bryce Young. But if Ballard will even move up to 1 is going to be an interesting conversation. I thought about maybe doing Houston moving up to number 1, but here in this occasion we'll have them stick and pick and take CJ Stroud. But I think in my next mock I might have Houston and Houston and Chicago flip places at 1 and 2, but decided to do Indianapolis. Again, they feel like the team that is well positioned enough, because I think them and Carolina have similar levels of desperation to be able to get to 1. I could just see Chicago being like, hey, at 9, we might get Tyree Wilson, we might get a Myles Murphy, but, not a Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. So let's just say here they do flip with Indianapolis. So Chicago moves down to 4. Indy takes Bryce Young. Houston takes CJ Stroud. I've had a lot of, Houston fans say, this is the guy they think that they're going to key in on. He does have the same agent as Deshaun Watson, so I do find that as an interesting layer added into the mix here. But that being said, it's a different client, so I don't think it'll affect things, but it's a relationship business just as much as it's anything else. So I am curious to see how that plays into it. And here we go. We're going to get into our second trade. I'm going to have the Arizona Cardinals move back from 3, which I do think is plausible. And depending on who this head coaching hire is and what their winning window looks like, do they think they can turn around and win right away? If not, hey, if they want to, stock up on some picks, get some young talent on the roster, I think this is a trade that's realistic and that propels Carolina into the top 3 and gives them the opportunity to take their future franchise quarterback. Meanwhile, for Arizona, 2 extra second rounders. You're talking about some additional, ammunition to repair the offensive line, find some other trench players on the defensive side, maybe add another corner, stuff like that. And again, if you're not looking to win right away, extra young talent on the roster is never a bad thing. But for Carolina, again, you get your future franchise guy, Will Levis. I currently have Levis ranked ahead of Stroud, but the easiest way to think about it is like Bryce Young's QB1, and then there's QB 2A and 2B with Levis and Stroud. Kind of depends on, which roll of dice you want to take. Can Will Levis hit his full potential? But you can feel comfortable with him running an NFL offense. He has experience of doing that. He does have the big arm. He does have more mobility than Stroud. And on the other side, Stroud's got the size. He's got a solid arm. He's the most accurate passer in the class to me. But, we've only seen one game where when things break down, he can create for himself, which that one game was college football playoff, huge stage to do it on, but it's just one game, And also you take into account the supporting cast, right? Like CJ Stroud had it made at Ohio State. Great play caller, ton of talent around them, and they're the best team in that conference, or at least one of. Meanwhile, Kentucky is like fighting to be middle of the pack in the SEC. He didn't have a great offensive line, not a whole lot of wide receiver talent, specifically after Wan'Dale Robinson was drafted by the Giants last year, so Levis was kind of left to fend for himself. Chris Rodriguez, I've said this a couple times, is about the only other guy on that offense I could say that dude's playing on Sundays, at least as it stands right now. So Levis here goes to Carolina, gets a future number 1 wide receiver, DJ Moore, a couple of good backs they can add into that. Offensive line that's up and coming, especially with the Kim Aquan, who feels like they got their bookend left tackle. So feels like a great situation for Levis to be able to thrive in. Then we get to the Chicago Bears. I think if they did stick and pick at 1, the pick would be Jalen Carter. So the fact that you can move down to 4, go to those extra picks, still get your guy, it's a no-brainer. Him or Will Anderson would be an A for me, especially if they did get those extra picks. Then it's just, it's cherry on top. I just think that 3-tech is something that Matt Eberflus is looking to add and fill that void on his defense. Maybe they sign a Daron Payne, or maybe they're looking to address this position a little bit later on in the draft. But I think, hey, why not just go get the best option, I think, for that position because, if you sign a Deron Payne, he's already in his mid-20s and you're paying him a lot of money. Jalen Carter, early 20s and really cheap. So I just say go that route. And then we get to Seattle, and they're going to get Will Anderson. I mean, what an awesome situation this would be if you're a Seahawks fan, right? One of the two best players that's not a quarterback falls in your lap because we have quarterbacks go 1, 2, and 3. And, I'm anticipating there's going to be quarterbacks going 1 and 2. So I think Arizona, kind of going back to that Cardinals trade down option, that pick's going to be hotly, it's going to be a hot commodity. A lot of people are going to want their hands on it. So I can see Carolina being desperate enough, forking up enough of a farm, moving up to 3, especially with, I think there's going to be 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10. And if 2 are gone by the first 2 picks, the demand for the position grows that much more. Ultimate winner here really is Seattle, just by having Will Anderson fall into their lap here at 5 versus like taking a Myles Murphy, taking a Brian Brzee, these guys that don't have a whole lot of production. You get a dude who's got production to spare in Will Anderson, and obviously a position need. The only concern about it is, Will Anderson's a stud, and hey, he plays the run a lot better than someone who's 6'2", 245, but he is 6'2", 245 versus, 6'4", 265. They already kind of have, a little bit of a smaller guys in the mix with Uchenna Nwosu and Boye Mafe. But nonetheless, again, Will Anderson plays the run like a guy bigger than his size. Anyways, let's start talking about the Detroit Lions here at 6. Thought about corner here. Devon Witherspoon seems to be, a fit here that makes a ton of sense. I just think with the depth of this corner class, teams are going to be incentivized to wait. So I'm going to go Myles Murphy here. A guy who comes with inside-out versatility, so there's a way to be able to keep Murphy out on the field with the likes of an Aiden Hutchinson, with the likes of a James Houston, the Acquara brothers, all that stuff. And a lot of the same stuff I've been saying about Brian Brzee here. He can basically play that 3-4 DN spot, and then you have Aleem McNeil play the nose, lined up over the center, and then you can have Hutchinson and James Houston there at the outside linebacker at the edge spots, rushing against tackles. So I think it kind of brings this defensive line into full form. And then when you go, nickel defense or dime, you got a 4-man front up front. It can be McNeil and Murphy there on the inside, and then whoever you want there on the edge, Hutchinson, and then whoever on the other side. So I think just kind of rounds out the defensive line. I think this is a little bit better value versus Brzee here at 6, so I do like this selection a little bit more than what I've done in previous mocks for the Lions. Then we get to the Raiders here at 7, and with the announcement of Tom Brady retiring, I just have absolutely no idea what to do with the Raiders here. I'm going to go Anthony Richardson here. A little spoiler alert, next week it'll probably be Tanner McKee in the 2nd. I think either route is certainly plausible. It just comes down to, we'll see in free agency who they're going to sign at quarterback and what that contract looks like, because hey, if they, fork up a 3-year contract to Jimmy Garoppolo with a lot of money in it and a lot of it's guaranteed, then they're probably outside this quarterback market and really trying to move their time frame to further down the line. Or if Jimmy Garoppolo decides to go elsewhere and they're stuck with Jacoby Brissett, all of a sudden the idea of drafting Anthony Richardson at 7 becomes pretty appealing. Have him sit for, half a year to a year, and it becomes your ideal future franchise quarterback. A lot of work to be done with Anthony Richardson, but to me, it's not like Malik Willis from last year where you're going to have to rework the mechanics almost entirely, and that step up in competition's huge from Liberty to the NFL level. It's going to be step up in competition from Florida to the NFL, but Liberty to the NFL is another extreme. And Richardson has throws on his tape where you take his best 5 to 10 plays, specifically throwing it, like, dude looks like he belongs in the top 10. It just comes down to there's not enough consistency in that throwing motion, especially against pressure, and not enough experience running an offense, right? Like being able to make a read at the line, being able to make adjustments, all that sort of stuff. Those little nuances that we don't really talk about when it comes to being a good quarterback, but the best do it. Breeze, Manning, Brady, all these guys who specifically not very mobile. Anthony Richardson does have that mobility, so I'm not saying that. But those little nuances, I don't know if he has enough experience just yet doing. But that makes a really interesting decision. Does he play year 1? Does he not? I don't know if he has enough experience in those fields to be able to get out on the field right away. But man, at the same time, I'm really pissed that Dan Mullen didn't play him 2 years ago. So I kind of just want to see a team be able to be like, hey, Anthony Richardson, take your lumps, get out on the field and learn. So I don't know. It could go either way. But for the Raiders, it'd probably be a draft and stash for Richardson to have him as the QB of the future. Anyways, Atlanta Falcons, a little bit something different here. I go edge all the time. I just wanted to do a little something different so not every mock draft feels the exact same over and over again. I'm going to go with Brian Branch here. Tyree Wilson certainly in play. Brian Brzee could be an interesting ad. Corner. If we're going to talk about corner to the Lions at 6, I think it's worth having the discussion at 7 with the Raiders and here at 8 with the Falcons. But I decided to go Brian Branch here so you can get some secondary help, a guy who can both play the nickel or play that strong safety role. I know they have Richie Grant, who was a guy I liked a ton coming out of UCF, had a really good Senior Bowl showing. Unfortunately, hasn't taken a leap forward yet, but still hope that he can do that. He's probably best suited as a box safety, so Branch probably becomes this nickel corner safety hybrid or free safety. But nonetheless, just trying to find some reinforcements there in the secondary. They did spend a couple of picks last year on the edge group, and maybe they want to spend some money there. It's not a very good edge free agency group, so I doubt it. But nonetheless, just trying to diversify your assets, right? We took edge top of the second round last year, also D'Angelo Malone early on day 3. Here, get a much needed upgrade there in the secondary, primarily then the nickel. And Brian Branch is one of these guys where I feel like an NFL team and their fan base in specific is going to see Branch be the pick, and they're going to be like, oh, really? I don't want that. It's a safety. I don't care. But then he's going to get on the field and he's going to be making plays left and right because only 4 missed tackles during his time in Alabama. Very instinctual, plays at a high speed. Feels like he sees and digests the college game at a faster level than just about anybody else around him. Also good in coverage, so you're getting run stopping, you're getting secondary help both in coverage as well. So to me, I think he's one of those guys that maybe fan bases aren't excited about on night 1, but then once he gets in uniform and starts making plays, people will fall in love with this pick. So that's kind of where I'm thinking that people are going to stand on Brian Branch, and I think that could be the case here with the Falcons at 8. Then we get to the Cardinals here at 9. So they got 2 second-round picks given to them, so they'll be featured pretty heavily in tomorrow's video. But here at 9, they're going to still get to address that edge position and go Tyree Wilson. Now you have an edge rotation of Wilson, Najee Sanders, and Cam Thomas. Okay, nice young group there to be able to work with. And with Wilson, I think there is some flexibility to be able to maybe put his hand in the dirt, play some 3-4 D-end, or play that outside linebacker spot. Also, we'll wait and see who the head coach hire ends up being, and then who the defensive coordinator and who the defensive play caller is going to end up being. That will determine, the fit here with Wilson and how great it is. But I think this makes sense. And this, feels like a guy you can add in, get him on the field pretty quick. Played 5 years. At Texas Tech, so a guy with a lot of experience, get him out there, should be a pro-ready guy. But again, with versatility to play inside and out, you can also work in Sanders and Thomas as well, see what they're all about. Then here at 10, Philadelphia Eagles, I'm going to go Lucas Van Ness. I've been going corner of late here, but I wanted to switch it up and go with a guy with, again, inside-out versatility. Redshirt sophomore coming out of Iowa. It's one of the younger guys in this edge group, and a really interesting blend of explosiveness, get off on the line, good bend, and some power. Like for a guy who 270-ish pounds, 6'3", 6'4", I'm waiting to see the official measurements at the combine and his pro day. But solid size, but nothing, especially with the power aspect of his game, nothing that says like Tyree Wilson 6'6", he's like 80-inch wingspan and 280 pounds. Like that dude profiles as like someone who's going to move folk. Lucas Van Ness, not so much, but he does have that in his profile. It's almost kind of like a George Karlaftis last year, but I even think Karlaftis feels a little bigger. So interesting player here and a guy who's shooting up boards. Jeremiah and Kiper both had him in the top 10. Last week, I had him go to the top of the second round. I was like, I don't know if he lasts this long, and I certainly don't think that's the case. Those two guys, Jeremiah and Kiper, are super tapped in. So if they're thinking he can go in the top 10, there's no reason for me to doubt that. Then we get to the Tennessee Titans. I've been going offensive line heavy, but Titans fans rejoice. I have something a little different here. Quentin Johnston. And can you imagine a world, don't worry, tomorrow we're going to address offensive line because I still think that is a huge area of need, but a Tennessee offense that features, obviously Derrick Henry first and foremost, but then off of that, a play-action game with Treylon Burks and Quentin Johnston. I mean, those two guys, Burks didn't run the 40 we were hoping, but that guy could still work down the field, and he's a mammoth of a human being. And then Quentin Johnston, 6'4", 225, 220 pounds. I think he'll run in the 4.3s. Great body control, the ability to go catch it and win it in the air. That duo off of play-action passing, when teams have to focus on Derrick Henry, is really interesting. Furthermore, also, Treylon Burks, a tank to bring down and is a satellite weapon in his own right. Quentin Johnston's the exact same thing, just slimmer build, a little bit taller. But yeah, I mean, to have those two guys not only as great yards after the catch weapons, but the deep passing attack off of play action from Derrick Henry is really interesting. Now you just need Ryan Tannehill to play well. But that would be a really fun offense all of a sudden to really watch it. It would give me a lot of good reasons to want to watch the Tennessee Titans play next year. Then we get to the Houston Texans here at 12. And again, I've been going Johnston here heavily, so a little bit something different here. Let's go Christian Gonzalez. I'm a huge fan of this DeMeco Ryans hire. It's cool that he, obviously a former player there in Houston, but man, of anybody who was on the coaching market this year, even more than Sean Payton, like when it comes to having a guy at the front of the room who can be a leader of men, DeMeco Ryans is number one on that list, in my opinion. So really excited to see what this could do for the trajectory of the Houston Texans franchise. But here you get Christian Gonzalez, and all of a sudden that corner room looks disgusting with Derek Stingley Jr., which, hey, I know Sauce Gardner was the rookie corner who got hit the ground running right away last year. But Derek Stingley Jr. was no scrub in his own right. And now that he's playing a defense, ideally, that's going to fit him a little bit better versus, cover too heavy Lovie Smith scheme. Man, pair him up with Christian Gonzalez on their side, who's a 6'2", long-armed corner who's going to run in the 4.3s. I think has that man zone flexibility in his scheme. So, man, all of a sudden it becomes a really hard team to throw on the outside. And then, hey, I think they need some help with the pass rush department. We're going to address that in tomorrow's video. But if you make the quarterback holding the ball just that extra quarter to half second longer, pass rush will certainly come to fruition from that point on. So, interesting fit, a little something different than what I've done. But if you're a Houston fan, are you digging going corner in the first round again? You have 2 first rounders, so you do have a little bit more flexibility than maybe if it was just the one. I digress. Jets hold the number 13 pick. Let's go Peter Skoronski. I've had him go into the Titans, but pretty much in this 11 to 13, maybe as late as Pittsburgh at 17. It feels like a nice spot for Skoronski. Guard tackle flexibility, kind of like what they got with Elijah Vera Tucker. So I think no matter what happens with Mekhi Becton, you have a little bit of an insurance policy. So upgrade somewhere there on the offensive line. And Peter Skoronski, a guy who may not have the most ideal measurements for a tackle, but as a guard, more than serviceable there. But even if he does play tackle, the dude balled out at Northwestern, and I'm not really too worried about it. Granted, his arm length is a little bit more of an outlier than some other guys. I think of Braden Smith from the Colts, just under 33-inch arms. Skoronski, I've heard, is about 32 and a quarter. So that's a rather drastic difference, but I think we are getting to a point where in the NFL where measurements are important, but there's enough outliers and exceptions to the rule to where you're able to give a pass to a player who's good enough, and I think Skoronski is worthy of that type of exception. Then we get to the New England Patriots at pick 14, a selection I continue to love. I would love Brian Branch here, but if not him, Devon Witherspoon, another one of these secondary players that just feels Bill Belichick, right? Witherspoon, unlike some of the other guys, feels more like man press, and that's the scheme he needs to be drafted into. Versus I think Porter has some flexibility. Gonzalez comes with flexibility. Witherspoon needs to be playing man press. And New England, I mean, that's Bill Belichick's MO. It's a team that runs a lot of single high, and they run a lot of man press. So I know they've mixed in more zone over years past, but hey, why not just roll back the clock, let Bill Belichick do what he's done best, and have Witherspoon be in the mix with Jack Jones, who really was impressive last year as a first-year player and a fourth-round selection at that. That becomes a really fun secondary, and especially if you can keep Devin McCourty around for one more year, and maybe address safety long-term next offseason. All of a sudden, that secondary, which was already pretty good this year, just gets that much scarier to face. Green Bay Packers at pick 15. I'm going to go Nolan Smith, and kind of like a Brian Branch. I think this is a guy who's going to go earlier than a lot of big draft fans will think. Branch, because of his position, it's like, hey, where do you slot him in at? And then for Nolan Smith, it's like that injury from Georgia, kind of derailed some of his potential push up the board. But nonetheless, team captain for Georgia, I think that does hold some merit, especially when it's one of the best defenses in college football. And a guy who's already a high-level run defender, an insane athlete. If he's able to do anything at the Combine or Pro Days, I expect those numbers to be pretty damn impressive. So I think a guy who's going to crush the interview process. Not something I can take into account because I'm not there, but I think this guy is going to crush this draft cycle in a lot of ways. So may not have had the most illustrious, insane tape to divulge into, specifically as a pass rusher, but I'm seeing a high-end athlete, high, recruiting status, already a good run defender, and I think a team like Green Bay is going to be like, yeah, okay, there's enough boxes he already checked. We can figure out the pass rush part. We'll be able to, get that coming along in his game. And then it eventually opens the door to be able to move on from Preston Smith, who to me, a little too up and down as a player, makes a lot of money. I could see him being a guy where it's like, hey, we need to spend that money elsewhere. We're going to part ways with Preston Smith. So then ideally, we're replacing one Smith with another here in Nolan. Then we get to the Washington Commanders at pick 16. Doing a little something different here. I go Michael Mayer. I'm just tired of hearing Logan Thomas is hurt. That's part of it. I think last year of his contract as well could also just be a guy who becomes a cap casualty ultimately, just because of his unavailability on the field. And then for Washington, it's like, hey, the wide receiver room's looking pretty good. Jahan Dotson was a solid hit last year in the mid-first rounds. I still have hope for De'Ami Brown. And you also have Curtis Samuel there last year of his deal upcoming. But then the tight end position, how could the rich get richer, right? Like, how can we get more assets out on the field, whether it's Sam Howell or someone else? So a little bit something different here. I don't know if it's necessarily the biggest need here. And I'm looking at Paris Johnson Jr. still on the board, obviously. So if they wanted to go in a different direction, offensive line makes a ton of sense. There's still an abundance of corners in play here, but corners can be what we address tomorrow in the second round. And I think there is some depth, specifically on the interior offensive line where they can wait. I'm still convinced, Charles Leno's got a couple years in him at left tackle, and then I'm still high on Sam Cosmi at right tackle. So I'm more so focusing on the interior offensive line for Washington, so we're going to wait for that need. Let's go with something fun here. Michael Mayer, another pass catcher in the mix, and then tomorrow we're going to go corner. Pittsburgh holds the 17th pick, and we're going to go Paris Johnson Jr. here. I mean, I am a Steelers fan, so let me just get that out of the way. This would be, if I could have any selection, this or, Joey Porter Jr., Devon Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, one of those top corners. Feels like they're going to be there for Pittsburgh at 17. That or Paris Johnson Jr., man. Like, that would be the pick to make me a very, very happy guy on night one. Here, this, I think, gives you an immediate upgrade over Dan Moore, and then maybe you could transition him to play right tackle, and you can have a little bit of a camp battle there. Whoever loses that job becomes, a solid enough swing tackle who has, starting experience. It feels like the way that could play out. And Paris Johnson Jr. to me, OT1, and it's actually interesting. I saw Mike Renner of Pro Football Focus. He's made some tweaks to his board. His top 4 offensive tackles is the exact same as mine now, so glad to see that some other people are thinking likewise, but that's Paris Johnson Jr., Peter Skoronski, Anton Harrison, then Broderick Jones, which we'll talk about those three, the third and fourth tackle there in a little bit. First-year starter at left tackle, already played great at Ohio State, and also a second-year starter. So a first-year starter at tackle, but second-year starter overall. That signals to me that Ohio State saw this guy as one of our 5 best offensive linemen. How do we get him on the field? So if Ohio State's feeling like that, I feel like a lot of NFL teams, hopefully the Steelers included, are looking at, how do I get him? That's somebody who's on the board. We need to make that the priority here. That needs to be the pick. And again, for a team like Pittsburgh, there's a glaring need there at left tackle. So don't need to say much more there. I saw Kenny Pickett roll out right way too much last year. Let's try to fix that problem. And as good as Paris Johnson Jr. was, his first year as a starting left tackle at Ohio State, again, first year playing that position, first year starting at that position, I think there's a whole lot more potential to tap into. Then we get to the Detroit Lions at pick 18. I'm going to go Joey Porter Jr. here. So a really, really fun couple of defensive picks here in the first round. Myles Murphy and then Joey Porter Jr. Get some defensive line reinforcement, and also a player who I think can make an impact now with Murphy, but also long-term, the prospects are very, upside driven. But then Joey Porter Jr. upgrade to the secondary, get some help for Jeff Okudah there on the perimeter. Makes a ton of sense. Joey Porter Jr. also a guy who just year over year at Penn State got better and better with each and every season he got to play. 6'2", long arms, and Aaron Glenn wants to play man press ideally. So I think Joey Porter Jr. fits perfectly into that. But I also think he does come with some zone flexibility in his portfolio. So we'll see what the combine numbers come in at, change of direction skills. We'll see that fully put on display. But I think he's a guy that can play man or zone. But Aaron Glenn wants to run a lot of man press. And I think Porter Jr. and Jeff Okudah on the outside is a really fun pairing to do that with. All right, next up, let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Sorry, Tampa fans, you're going to get the Bijan Robinson card this week. It's always hard to find who that home is going to be for Bijan, because I know some fan bases are going to be upset by it because it's a running back, and I get it. But Bijan is more than just a running back, and I'm normally somebody who does not like running backs in the first round. But Bijan is he's the best pure runner in this draft class, a guy who can play out in the slot. You can even get creative enough and play him out wide if, the role is niche enough, right? Like when Texas did it, he was just catching screens, but I think you could add a little bit more into the mix there. But Byron Leftwich isn't there as the OC, so it kind of dampens this argument. But there was the quote mid-year from Leftwich saying, it's not about rush yards, it's about rush attempts. So if that thinking does continue to linger in the building, even beyond Leftwich's departure, I think Bijan makes a ton of sense. So sorry, Tampa fans, again, you get the Bijan card, but hey, if this were the pick, and if somebody were to say, hey, gun to your head, which one of these players taken in the first round is most likely to be a Pro Bowler next year? Bijan's probably my answer. I mean, him or one of the quarterbacks, I guess. But, Bijan feels like a guy who's going to be able to make an impact right away, and he's certainly better than Leonard Fournette in my eyes. So, should be an upgrade, even if, you don't love the value here in the first round if you're a Bucs fan. Next up, Seattle Seahawks. We're going to end the fall of Brian Brzee. Here, it's tough because Daniel Jeremiah has him going, into the 30s to the Chiefs. Trevor Sikkema did the same thing. And then Kuiper has him outside the first round entirely. I don't think that's going to happen because he still is a sick athlete, and I think once we get in the combine, he'll resurface in those first round mocks. But 6'5", 300 pounds. I'd like to see him add maybe 15, 20 pounds. He could add a little bit more strength. I think a guy who pretty much right away, especially with adding a little bit of muscle, becomes a pretty solid run defender. Doesn't have much on tape in way of like pass rush moves, so a lot of work to be done there, but for the Seahawks here, you're talking about adding two legit stud-level athletes there on the defensive line. Will Anderson, a guy who I think plug and play is going to make an impact right away. And Brzee, because of that, you have a little bit of time to kind of sit, wait, and give it a year to see how it ultimately turns out. But I still think Brzee's worth being a first-round pick. And here at 20, I think I've made this pick at 5 for Seattle. So here at 20, to me, it feels like a no-brainer. And all of a sudden, that defensive line looks stout in Seattle. Still can get a little better against the run, but that still feels like a really solid defensive line in the pass rush department. Chargers hold the 21st pick. I'm going to go with Jordan Addison here. We're going to actually have a couple of receivers come off the board. Addison and Zay Flowers, who Flowers is going to be the pick here at 22 to the Ravens. These two go back and forth. They are my wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. Given a day, I could wake up thinking the complete one is going to be 2 and then the other one's going to be 3, and then the next morning I could wake up and think it's the other way around. So it's close. Addison, a little bit more size, but he is slight in his frame, a little thin, a little bit more drop concerns as well. This big push from Zay Flowers, and he looks good at the Shrine Bowl. A lot of that stuff's making me be like, yeah, maybe Zay Flowers is the second best receiver in this class. Nonetheless, I do think these are two of, if not the best, 2 route runners in this draft class. So similar skill sets. They also bring downfield speed. Flowers might have a little bit more of that, but I also think Addison is more of a weapon in the intermediate, that 10 to 20 yard range of the field. So give and take what you need here. But for the Chargers, talking about a need, I mean, that speed wide receiver, the guy who can get open deep down the field, has been something I've been asking this team to add, and now they have an upgraded OC, in my opinion, with Kellen Moore over Joe Lombardi. Now let's go get that guy and Jordan Addison, who can be the deep route running archetype, the guy who opens up that part of the offense and gets Justin Herbert to flip the field, take advantage of his arm strength. A lot of Chargers fans have said they want Zay Flowers here, so if you're a Chargers fan, for the sake of your mental health, just flip 21 and 22. It doesn't make a difference because these two guys are going back to back. And again, I think I said this last week. If they do go with Addison or Flowers here, I hope they can find a way to keep Keenan Allen around. I know he's got a huge cap hit. Maybe it's a restructure. Maybe it's another extension. I know that's kind of dangerous territory on the wrong side of 30. But I want this first-round wide receiver to be in addition to Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, not replacing Keenan Allen to pair up with Mike, if that makes sense. And then for the Ravens, I mean, how many people have told you that the Ravens need wide receiver? I don't feel like I need to drone on too much, but I do like that speed element that both bring to the table, a little bit more so with Flowers because Baltimore is so run-heavy. We'll see how much that changes with the new offensive coordinator, but given the backfield talent and Lamar Jackson's inherent running ability, I expect it to continue to be a run-heavy offensive approach. And then Zay Flowers, is the play-action guy over the top, kind of similar to what we talked about with Quentin Johnston earlier. Defenses have to respect that run game. Safeties will have to creep up into the box, and Zay Flowers has that deep speed to be able to make you regret it. Minnesota Vikings, them and the Jags are actually going to go back-to-back corner here. For the Vikings here at 23, I'm going to go Cam Smith. There he is. And then for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm going to go with Kelee Ringo. For Smith, may not have the most illustrious, athletic profile. May not have the most insane man press ability, kind of like a J.C. Horn did. And he might not be as good of an athlete, again, as J.C. Horn was, but does a whole lot of things right. Did get a little handsy this past year, so I know a lot of people have him in the top 3 of their corner rankings. I'm a little bit lower. He's right there at 4 or 5. Him and Ringo can go back and forth. We'll see. Tyreek Stevenson's making a name for himself at the Senior Bowl. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. But yeah, I still like Cam Smith, even without some of those maybe intangibles and maybe not being as, highly, well-rounded as a prospect as J.C. Horn was, but that's why he's not going 8. He's going 23 here. Minnesota has a clear cornerback need, so need I say more? No. And then we get to the Jags here, also a team that needs a number 2 corner on the outside. I think Shaq Griffin makes logical sense to be a cut candidate. Darius Williams is already moving into the nickel. He could also be a guy who is moved on from. It was a 3-year contract, if memory serves, so depending on the guaranteed money, there might be some savings there, but I definitely think Griffin is probably on his way out of Jacksonville, a team that's over the cap, looking to save money, and I think Griffin is one of those logical cut candidates. So looking for a guy to play on the outside. In Kelee Ringo, it's funny. I have been thinking for a while. This almost felt like AJ Terrell, just because Kelee Ringo did get cooked by Marvin Harrison Jr. in the college football playoff, the semifinal game. But that said, Marvin Harrison Jr., if he came out in this draft class, would be a lock for the top 10. He'd be wide receiver 1 for me. Like, simple as that. So next year, easy front runner for wide receiver 1 in that class, and top 5 to 10 pick. And this almost kind of feels back what I was saying, AJ Terrell versus Jamar Chase in the national championship game in 2019, where Jamar Chase made AJ Terrell look like a punk. He straight up embarrassed that man. But he still went in the first round, and look at what AJ Terrell's become. So, let's not judge everything off of, just one game. And actually, I was thinking about that the other day. Then I heard Goathouse, another great YouTuber and a big draft pundit and a big draft head as well. Check him out if you don't already, watch his videos. But, he said the same thing. And I was like, yeah. See, that felt like validation to me, where it's like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and this kind of does feel like a similar situation. Yeah, Ringo may not be the most laterally gifted. He does have a tendency to give up big plays, but I think that's kind of how Georgia coaches it up there. Anyways, a guy who's 6'2", running the 4.3s and has long arms, worthwhile first-round projection or, project here for the Jags, especially when they have that need. Then here at 25, I'm going to do a little something different, but I'm going to go Drew Sanders here. Off-ball linebacker, already a need for the Giants, and with his blitzing ability, this guy screams Wink Martindale to me. Now, granted, I did want to throw out one other thing. I think in next week's mock, I'm not going to go linebacker first round for the Giants, and instead I'm going to go Ivan Pace, the linebacker from Cincy, who was an awesome off-ball blitzer for the Bearcats and has been dominating the Senior Bowl in that exact same role. So I think as a third-round selection, that's a worthwhile way of going. Getting a similar player, but Sanders, I do think, is a higher level athlete, gives you more in regards to coverage. So there is a reason he'll go, somewhere in that 20 to 40 range versus Pace is probably somewhere mid to late day 2 type of guy. But man, I would love to see this fit in the mix for the Giants. The reason you would maybe go with Pace a little bit later on versus Sanders here is like wide receiver, corner, depending on how the board plays out, you might see those as bigger needs, and there might be potentially better value in their eyes. Then we get to the Cowboys here at pick 26. I was talking about Tyree Stevenson just a minute ago. This guy is, again, making a name for himself at the Senior Bowl. I don't think he'll stay at player number 95 here on the mock draft database simulator much longer. But I mean, 6 foot, 190 pounds, played really well at Miami, and another guy who year over year just kind of got better and better and better. And specifically now at the Senior Bowl, we're really seeing that man press ability put on display, and he has been taking dudes out of the route at the line of scrimmage, which, hey, he's getting praise from coaches there. There's no reason to think he can't be a first rounder off the size, the athletic measurables. I do think he'll run pretty well somewhere there in the mid 4.4s, and what he's already put on display at the Senior Bowl with his man press ability. So for Dallas, I think they do need a number 2 corner. It comes down to, I guess, how you feel about Deron Bland, but don't worry, we're going to address speed receiver a little bit later on in this draft for Dallas. Bills at 27. Let's go with O'Cyrus Torrence. I hate to double up to the same thing I did last week, but did you watch the Bengals, AFC divisional game? This team needs offensive line help like yesterday. So clear upgrade over Roger Saffold, which unfortunately that signing didn't work out. Torrence, maybe a little bit slow start at the Senior Bowl, but he does look rocked up. Some of the stuff I've seen, that dude looked as yoked for a guard as I've seen in my life. And trust the state of Florida, great power in his profile. I think this is a guy who could open up that run game a ton while also keeping Josh Allen upright and clean. Then we get to the Bengals at 28. I thought about offensive tackle here, but I decided to just do the same thing I've been doing of late. Darnell Washington. You basically get another offensive lineman on the field, but also somebody who brings another element to the passing game. I don't think it's a wide route tree, but at 6'7", 260, and a guy who moves pretty well for that, catch in the flat, run the seam, stop at the first down marker, and run that curl. If he does that, that's about all we really need, plus the added blocking ability he brings to the table, which for a team that is either going to be starting Jackson Carman or Jonah Williams at left tackle, that feels like a necessary element to be added to this team. And then also Lyle Collins struggled in pass protection this year. So either side of the offensive line, he feels like a guy who could give some extra reinforcements there. Then we get to the New Orleans Saints. Hey, the Saints are in the first round. How fun is that? Obviously, this comes virtue of the Sean Payton trade, which real quick, I'll kind of talk about that. I mean, an absolute win for the Saints. They weren't picking the first round, and a guy who, if they didn't trade him, was just going to be an analyst this year. They got a first round pick for him, and then a pick swap next year, getting a second, forfeiting their third. So that's pretty awesome. A+ for the Saints. For the Broncos, I'll go with a solid C, because if Sean Payton was just a regular head coach, it'd probably among my top 3 favorite hires. I can get behind it. But a first rounder and then a pick swap, day 2 pick swap next year for a head coach, yeah, I don't know. And especially when I fall into the camp of, I don't know if you can fix Russell Wilson. As good as Sean Payton is as a head coach, I don't know how much magic you can work to save Russell Wilson. And, great tweet. I can't remember who exactly put it out. I think it might have been Ian Rappaport. But you look at the trades for Russ and Sean Payton, and they've given up 3 1s, 3 2s, and 3 players for Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. So it better work out. That's all I can say. So I'll go with the C because, if it was just a hire, I'd like it. But giving up that much assets for a head coach is tough. But anyways, New Orleans Saints. I'm going to go defensive line. David Onyemata is a free agent. He's more of a run stopper than anything else. But I'm going to go Kalijah Kancey, a guy who's gaining a ton of steam. Feels like he could work himself into that late first round, early second round conversation. Much more of a pass rusher, 6'1", 280-ish pounds. Not going to give you much in the way of run defense. Not like an Aaron Donald who is undersized but still somehow plays the run at a high level because of his strength profile. Kancey, more so a finesse rusher, but a damn good one at that. I mean, over 90 pass rush grade during his time at Pitt this past season. Has a great get off, good with his hands as well. And you add him into the mix for a team that's looking to add more pass rush talent. Could potentially lose Marcus Davenport. Feels like a logical fit, but I could also see them wanting to go maybe a Siaki Ika trying to replace David Onyemata. But we'll see how free agency plays out ultimately. And we are going to address edge later on in this mock draft for New Orleans. Then we get to the Chiefs here at 30. I'm going to go with Broderick Jones. Just a pick that I think I think he's a guy the NFL is going to like more than I do, just because he is raw as a pass protector, but size and strength profile is something you can't teach. You either have it or you don't. So I think the NFL is going to be a little bit higher on him than I am. And I'm looking at a Chiefs team that either you got to replace Andrew Wiley or Orlando Brown Jr. is going to be a free agent. And you're having to replace both. So no matter what tackles they need, it just comes down to is it going to be 1 or 2 tackles that you're looking to replace. So I think edge and offensive line make a ton of sense. I've been going edge pretty heavily for the Chiefs, so let's change it around here a little bit. Also, this is a deep edge group, so maybe you go off to tackle here where Broderick Jones is still available. A lot of people have him off the board by pick 18 or so. Once you get to the middle of the first round, a lot of people have Jones off the board. Here he lingers a little bit, so let's say the Chiefs take advantage of that value and address edge tomorrow. Last pick we'll talk about here in the first round video is the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is basically your Chauncey Gardner-Johnson replacement insurance. Again, we'll have to wait and see how free agency plays out, but if they do miss out on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they do have some money to spend this free agency, which is crazy, but if they do miss out, he gets too much of a bag from elsewhere and the Eagles can't match, so be it. Antonio Johnson, I think, brings a lot of that to the table, especially when Avonte Maddox is healthy. Then it was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson primarily playing strong safety, but it had the flexibility to do that or play the nickel when Maddox went down. Antonio Johnson gives you the exact same thing, but he does it at 6'3", 200. So maybe losing a little bit of fleet of foot ability, but you're gaining in size and wingspan, which is interesting. So again, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson replacement, and a guy I like a ton. And this is just one of those fits where it's kind of like Bijan Robinson and Michael Mayer. It's hard to find where Antonio Johnson's going to go, but this is one where if the Eagles miss out on CJ Gardner-Johnson, this is a seamless addition, and you can kind of keep doing the exact same thing that they've been doing under DC Jonathan Gannon. But that is going to do it for round 1 of this updated 2023 NFL mock draft. I'll scroll across the top so you can get one more glimpse at the first 31 picks in this mock. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section. Who's your favorite team? Do you like the pick? Do you hate the pick? Are you somewhere there in the middle? And let me hear your rationale. As long as you're not an asshole, I respond to every comment in the comments section, best of my ability at least. So I'd love to hear why you hate or love a pick, and let's just talk some football down below. And as always, be sure to come back tomorrow when we give you round 2, and then Sunday we'll have round 3 coming here on the channel. So be sure to come back for those videos, but until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.